This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Eugenics and Other Evils by G. K. Chesterton. Part 1. The False Theory. Chapter 5. The Flying Authority. It happened one day that an atheist and a man were standing together on a doorstep, and the atheist said, "It is raining." To which the man replied, "What is raining?" Which question was the beginning of a violent quarrel and a lasting friendship. I will not touch upon any heads in the dispute, which doubtless included Jupiter Pluvis and the neuter gender, pantheism, Noah's Ark, Macintoshes, and the passive mood. But I will record the one point upon which the two persons emerged in some agreement. It was that there is such a thing as an atheistic literary style, that materialism may appear in the mere diction of a man, though he be speaking of clocks or cats or anything quite remote from theology. The mark of the atheistic style is that it instinctively chooses the word which suggests that things are dead things, that things have no souls. Thus they will not speak of waging war, which means willing it. They speak of the outbreak of war, as if all the guns blew up without the men touching them. Thus those Socialists that are atheists will not call their international sympathy, they will call it solidarity, as if the poor men of France and Germany were physically stuck together like dates in a grocer's shop. The same Marxian Socialists are accused of cursing the capitalists inordinately, but the truth is that they let the capitalists off much too easily. For instead of saying that employers pay less wages, which might pin the employers to some moral responsibility, they insist on talking about the rise and fall of wages, as if a vast silver sea of sixpences and shillings was always going up and down automatically, like the real sea at Margate. Thus they will not speak of reform, but of development, and they spoil their one honest and virile phrase, the class war, by talking of it as no one in his wits can talk of a war, predicting its finish and final result as one calculates the coming of Christmas Day or the taxes. Thus, lastly, as we shall see, touching our special subject matter here, the atheist style in letters always avoids talking of love or lust, which are things alive, and calls marriage or concubinage the relations of the sexes, as if a man and a woman were two wooden objects standing at a certain angle and attitude to each other, like a table and a chair. Now the same anarchic mystery that clings around the phrase "el plit" clings around the phrase "ill fought." In English it is generally represented by the passive mood in grammar, and the Eugenists and their like deal especially in it. They are as passive in their statements as they are active in their experiments. Their sentences always enter tail first and have no subject, like animals without heads. It is never "the doctor should cut off his leg" or "the policeman should collar that man." It is always "such limbs should be amputated" or "such men would be under restraint." Hamlet said, "I should have fatted all the Regent kites with this slave's offal." The Eugenist would say, "The Regent kites should if possible be fattened, and the offal of this slave is available for the dietetic experiment." Lady Macbeth said, "Give me the daggers, I'll let his bowels out." The Eugenist would say, "In such cases the bowels should," etc. Do not blame me for the repulsiveness of the comparisons. I have searched English literature for the most decent parallels to Eugenist language. The formless god that broods over the East is called Om. The formless god who has begun to brood over the West is called On. But here we must make a distinction. The impersonal word On is French, and the French have a right to use it because they are a democracy. When a Frenchman says one, he does not mean himself, but the normal citizen. He does not mean merely one, but one and all. On ne que sa parole does not mean noblesse oblige, or I am the Duke of Billingsgate and must keep my word. It means one has a sense of honour as one has a backbone. Every man, rich or poor, should feel honourable, and this, whether possible or no, is the purest ambition of the Republic. But when the Eugenists say conditions must be altered, or ancestry should be investigated, or what not, it seems clear that they do not mean that the democracy must do it, whatever else they may mean. They do not mean that any man, not evidently mad, may be trusted with these tests and rearrangements, as the French democratic system trusts such a man with a vote, or a farm, or the control of a family. That would mean that Jones and Brown, being both ordinary men, would set about arranging each other's marriages, and this state of affairs would seem a little elaborate. And it might occur even to the Eugenic mind that if Jones and Brown are quite capable of arranging each other's marriages, it is just possible that they might be capable of arranging their own. This dilemma, which applies in so simple a case, applies equally to any wide and sweeping system of Eugenist voting. For though it is true that the community can judge more dispassionately than a man can judge in his own case, this particular question of the choice of a wife is so full of disputable shades in every conceivable case that it is surely obvious that almost any democracy would simply vote the thing out of the sphere of voting, as they would any proposal of police interference in the choice of walking weather or of children's names. I should not like to be the politician who should propose a particular instance of Eugenics to be voted on by the French people. Democracy dismissed, it is here hardly needful to consider the other old models. Modern scientists will not say that George III in his lucid intervals should settle who is mad, or that the aristocracy that introduced gout shall supervise diet. I hold it clear, therefore, if anything is clear about the business, that the Eugenists do not merely mean that the mass of common men should settle each other's marriages between them. The question remains, therefore, whom do they instinctively trust when they say this or that ought to be done? What is this flying and evanescent authority that vanishes whenever we seek to fix it? Who is the man who is the lost subject that governs the Eugenist verb? In a large number of cases I think we can simply say that the individual Eugenist means himself and nobody else. Indeed, one Eugenist, Mr. A. H. Huth, actually had a sense of humour and admitted this. He thinks a great deal of good could be done with a surgical knife if we would only turn him loose with one. And this may be true. A great deal of good could be done with a loaded revolver in the hands of a judicious student of human nature. But it is imperative that the Eugenist should perceive that on that principle we can never get beyond a perfect balance of different sympathies and antipathies. I mean that I should differ from Dr. Saleeby or Dr. Karl Pearson not only in a vast majority of individual cases, but in a vast majority of cases in which they were bound to admit that such a difference was natural and reasonable. The chief victim of these famous doctors would be yet more famous doctor, that eminent though unpopular practitioner, Dr. Fell. To show that such rational and serious differences do exist, I will take one instance from that bill which proposed to protect families and the public generally from the burden of feeble-minded persons. Now, even if I could share the Eugenist contempt for human rights, even if I could start gaily on the Eugenic campaign, I should not begin by removing feeble-minded persons. I have known as many families in as many classes as most men, and I cannot remember meeting any very monstrous human suffering arising out of the presence of such insufficient and negative types. There seem to be comparatively few of them, and those few by no means the worst burdens upon domestic happiness. I do not hear of them often. I do not hear of them doing much more harm than good, and in the few cases I know well they are not only regarded with human affection, but can be put to certain limited forms of human use. Even if I were a Eugenist, then I should not personally elect to waste my time locking up the feeble-minded. The people I should lock up would be the strong-minded. I have known hardly any cases of mere mental weakness making a family a failure. I have known 8 or 9 cases of violent and exaggerated force of character making a family a hell. If the strong-minded could be segregated, it would quite certainly be better for their friends and families. And if there is really anything in heredity, it would be